Thank you, Tracy. I'm really excited to be here. I am on the board of directors of the Women's Bar Association of Illinois. And as Tracy mentioned, please keep your camera on, and it's okay while you're eating. This is meant to be somewhat interactive so that we can see, um, um, that you're engaging in the presentation. And Rachel will take questions in the end. And again, yes, you can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself at the end. Before we get into introducing our fantastic speaker, I just want to let you know about some upcoming programs and events. So next week on March 5th is our judicial reception at the Cultural Center. So this is an opportunity for you to mingle and mix with the judges and help support our honorees. I will be there next week, as I know will Tracy. So hopefully we will see you next week at the judicial reception. Coming up after that on March 18th is our annual meeting that will take place at the Chicago Bar Association. So please come for that as well. I think we serve dinner for that, if I'm not mistaken. And we definitely need a quorum. This is your opportunity to really learn more about the organization, to help nominate. The nominating committee will be discussing our bylaws. So we definitely need a quorum to get those passed. And it's also an opportunity for you if you're interested in becoming more involved or running for the board, to make your presence known and to learn more about the positions on our board. With respect to CLEs, we do have some fantastic CLEs coming up in April. On April 14th, it will be both in person and a Zoom option. So the in person, you can buy lunch and you can network. It's on the topic of when biology meets the bar, genetic testing, reproductive health, and policy. So a very, very exciting and timely topic. And then after that, a topic that definitely applies to all women, irrespective of age, because please God, you will get there at some point. The Silent Shift Supporting Mental Health During Perimenopause, and that will be in person at the ISBA on April 22nd. So please do be on the lookout for these fantastic programs and continue to support the Women's Bar Association of Illinois. If you are not a member of the Women's Bar, please do join, and we certainly have specials. It's the end of the year, and if you join, then you will still get the membership rate for our upcoming events and programs. So I am very, very excited to introduce Rachel Axelrod, who I've had an opportunity to get to know personally. We met, believe it or not, at a mentorship event where we both, as the more seasoned individuals, had the opportunity to mentor others. And it was a program that actually Rachel was one of the co-chairs. So I had an opportunity to hear her speak and to learn about her. And I can tell you she is excellent. She is she was practiced at the big firms for quite some time as a trial attorney, a litigator. So by profession and training, she is a seasoned speaker. And then she made the very smart decision to get out of law. I should say smart because, at least from my perspective, it's always a very, very stressful situation.
Careful,
Um,
Alan.
but hey, if you don't find it stressful, it's certainly a noble, noble, noble profession.
There you go.
But Rachel decided to take her practice a different way and hone in her excellent presentation skills to help others. So, as you probably read from her bio, she helps those train for trials, keynotes, speaking engagements, all sorts of presentations, TED Talks. That is her area of expertise. And I now turn it over to Rachel to help us better improve our speaking skills.
Thank you so much, Helen. I love that introduction. And there's a season for everything. I loved my lawyer season and where I am now. So it's all good. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you, Tracy, for having me at the Women's Bar Association of Illinois. We're gonna have a fun time today, okay? This isn't your average CLE. I can't promise. Tracy's a big fan of true crime, and she was giving me a little pressure that there's no blood and gore during this CLE, but we're gonna have fun today. So if you want to keep your cameras on, that would be great. I don't care if you're eating lunch. It is nice for me to see your faces so I know if I'm killing it or if you're bored. But if you're, not if you're not able to do that, I understand too. It's totally fine. So, all right, let's get started. I'm excited. This is going to be fun. So as Helen mentioned, yes, I did have I had a decade in being a lawyer here in Chicago, Illinois, and I started out as a first year lawyer in 1997 at a law firm that at the time was called Schiff Harden and Waite. Now it's Arent Fox, and I was in the products liability group. There were the most part of my days were spent defending asbestos manufacturers. I know that sounds super exciting, but it was a great way to start your career. I was able to take a lot of depositions and argue motions, and I got a great experience at the beginning. But the practice group that I was in was very male oriented. In fact, I was the only woman in the group. My strategy as a first and second year lawyer was to try to be one of the boys. Yes, that was my goal. I just wanted to fit in and be tough and sharp and strong. So, not really sure why, but I thought at the time using the F word. Yep, I said it. I'm not going to actually say the word, but dropping the F bomb here and there was going to make me sound tough. I used this strategy for kind of a long time, for several years, and I thought it was going really, really well until, well, one day I got a review that said I was immature. Yes, immature. It was such a cringe moment. I was kind of melting inside of embarrassment. I was really just trying to be taken seriously. I didn't realize that it was coming off as immature. So it was a terrible communication strategy. But it did teach me a very valuable lesson. Effective communication is not about shortcuts or quick fixes, and it's definitely not about excessive swearing. No matter what the communication is, whether it's before a judge, on a Zoom with a lawyer on the other side, in a client meeting, or just over lunch with your practice group, it's all about connecting to your audience. You might be thinking, okay, I like her so far. That was a good story with the F bombs. How do I connect to my audience? Like, what do you mean? Well, after practicing law for a decade and running TEDxChicago, as Helen alluded to, and now coaching hundreds of clients on their keynotes and presentations, I'm here to tell you 3 lessons on how you can connect better to your audience. See if this works. Okay, guys, ready? Lesson number 1, use storytelling. Who here doesn't love a good story? Everyone loves stories, right? Either it's in a book or on a Netflix show or a movie. We're all about the stories. We all love them. In fact, since the beginning of time, humans have used storytelling. Think about ancient cave drawings or even stories from the Bible. Storytelling has been around for a very, very long time. Why does storytelling impact us so deeply? What is it about storytelling? Well, there's something called neural coupling in science. It's a phenomenon where the brain of a listener can synchronize with the brain of the storyteller. It makes the listener feel like he or she is actually experiencing the story. The listener automatically gains empathy for the storyteller and for the subject of the story. The science behind this has to deal with the release of the chemical oxytocin in our brains. And as much as I'm sure you would love to hear me tell you all about the chemistry of oxytocin, no, I will not be talking about that. That is a completely different talk and outside of my lane for sure. Instead, just rest assured that there is science behind why we love storytelling and why that resonates with us. And I'm going to talk to you instead about how you can bring storytelling into your practice. Doing this helps build trust and connection with the people to whom you're speaking, clients, colleagues, judges, opposing counsel. When you're thinking about what stories to tell, always ask first, who is your audience? What are their ages? What's their background? Will they understand your references or your stories or your examples? Like, who are you talking to? So today I knew I was talking to a group of mostly women, although I see that we have one man. I'm sorry to call you out, Mark Palmer, but you are the only man on this call, which is great. We're thrilled to have you. But I knew I was talking to a group of mostly women. I was going to say all women, but can't say that today. But I knew that who I was talking to, right? I knew my audience could relate to my experience. And I mean, I get you. I know where you've been. I've done it too. We're all on the same we're all on the same page. And I knew you could relate to a young woman lawyer trying to sound credible and sharp and tough. We all want that, right? If I told that story to a group of men, maybe they would relate to it, but not as well as this group here. In fact, I might have made them feel uncomfortable telling that story because they sort of like feel maybe some guilt associated with it. If I told the story to a group of non-lawyers, it probably wouldn't have landed as well. I'm assuming it landed really well with you, but it might not have landed very well because they couldn't exactly picture being in a products liability group in a large law firm, trying to fit in or sound tough. I know everyone here on the call can imagine that and relate to it. So that's why I picked that story for this particular group. So I asked myself, who's the audience and which story out of my library of stories was I going to introduce today? So after you've considered your audience, which is always the number one thing to do, then you have to decide the next step, and that is to cover the 5 fundamentals of a story. Okay, I call them the 5 C's of a story: context, characters, conflict, climax, and closure. Context is the setting of the story, characters, who's involved, conflict, the tension or challenge in the story. Climax is the turning point or the moment when the conflict is resolved, and then closure is how the story ends. Here's an example to illustrate this. So I have a client, Michael, who recently gave a talk about how he turned responding to uncomfortable situations into his superpower. Here's how he started his talk. Okay, I'm Michael, starting the talk. At 2 a.m., we woke up to crack, crack, crack over and over again. We shot out of bed to see what was going on. The windows and doors of our house were smeared with hundreds of eggs. Their yolks were oozing down the front of our house, like pieces of white eggshells that were strewn across our lawn. It was a huge mess. It looked like a canvas of hatred and destruction. This is what I experienced nearly every weekend during my junior year of high school. Many of you know that I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, but what you may not know is that I was relentlessly bullied all during high school. Now, I know that was a little dramatic for most lawyers. That's not a story that, you'd necessarily throw out there with opposing counsel or judges or even your clients, but I'm telling you this story to illustrate a point. And that is that setting the stage, you can picture the scene and you want to know more about Michael. Like, what's going on here? Eggs on the house? Like, what's happening here? Did he do something? What's going on? And that neural coupling thing that I was talking about before, that started to happen. We were all picturing a house in the suburb that had been egged by teenage bullies, right? So we all kind of had that neural coupling at the same time. Let's talk about the 5 C's really quickly to kind of just categorize that to make it a reality. It's one thing to hear these 5 C's, and it's another thing to actually plug in what it is. So what's the context? That's obvious. House in the suburbs. Who are the characters? Michael and his family and some bullies we now know. What is the conflict? So sometimes conflict and climax can be a little bit more uh, complicated. So that's the tension or the challenge. For me, the conflict would be, why are eggs being thrown at the house? Like, is this for retribution? Was this a random act? What is going on here? So that's the conflict of trying to figure out what's happening. And the climax is, well, the resolution of the conflict. And you knew that bullies did this to Michael every weekend during high school. But what about the closure? So I did not give you the closure for this story, and I did that intentionally because sometimes not telling you the closure makes you want to learn and figure out what's going on. And you can see in a lot of television shows, again, that's like the Netflix model, right? They don't always end the story. So you're like, oh my God, okay, one more episode, one more thing. I got to hear what happened. So the point is that you knew there were bullies, but you didn't understand like how this ended. Why was he bullied? What happened next? Did the bullies get caught? It really leaves you wanting to know more. So you guys want to hear about what happened? You want to know the closure for this story, the end of the story? I feel like you do. So the end of the story, and actually how he ended his talk at the end. He sort of dangled this out at the beginning, and then at the very end of his talk, he told them what happened. So Michael became very, very successful. And even though he had a rough high school period, he did become very successful. And he had been back in his hometown. He doesn't even live in the suburbs anymore, but he was back visiting his parents. And when he had to go to Best Buy he had to pick something up at Best Buy. And when he was standing in line, he happened to glance out of the corner of his eyes. One of the bullies was working at a low-level job at Best Buy, and he just looked at him, and was in a very different position than in high school, and he sort of chuckled to himself, feeling very grateful about what he had learned in his life because of what he had gone through and how far it had taken him. So there's the closure of that story. It's kind of wrapping a bow at the end. You're like, okay, Michael's fine. He did well. He's great. You don't have to worry about Michael. And it's satisfying. It's kind of like that click at the end of the story. So stories don't have to be long, right? That wasn't a very long story. They just need to have structure. And whether it's about you or your clients or anyone really, the story, if it follows these 5 C's, it will draw the attention in, and it brings the audience involved in the story, and it will make an impact. As a bonus, stories also encourage the listener to care and to trust you. Feel like maybe I'll feel a little trust here. I've told you Michael's story, I told you my story. So you feel like you can relate. You almost feel like you're like, I kind of feel like I know Rachel in a weird way. She's told me now these 2 pretty good stories. So it really builds trust between the listener and the speaker. So whenever it's possible, please try to weave storytelling into your practice. Now, I understand in the legal world that's not always possible, right? The situations are not always conducive to telling a story. You might be arguing over a rule of law, or you might be negotiating a transaction or a real estate deal, and you're not just throwing in some story about your personal life to connect better to your audience. I get it. You can't always throw in a story. But in those instances, there is another way to connect to your audience. Lesson number 2, keep it simple. When I say keep it simple, I mean, don't try to do too much. We as lawyers want to be as we want to cover as much as possible. That's why we say any and all, or by and between, or some of these legal phrases to catch all to make sure that we're covering our bases. But that does make it more complicated. The best presentations, arguments, or talks present one clear idea with a through line. Don't overcomplicate things. Make it easy for your audience, and in your case, a judge, a mediator, your client, whoever. Make it easy for them to understand your idea, theme, or your theory of the case. Don't try to do too much. Here's what I mean. So the story I just told you about Michael being bullied in high school, that was used to support the main idea of his talk, which was all about how he made overcoming uncomfortable situations into his superpower. At one point, when Michael and I were brainstorming for his talk, he suggested adding a section about lessons he learned from becoming a dad. And I told him that was an entirely different keynote. It would have been a great keynote. He's a wonderful dad, and I'm sure he learned a lot of lessons, but it was completely different from the lessons he learned about overcoming uncomfortable situations. They weren't connected. So instead of doing that, we kept it simple and clean. And his talk was limited to just the lessons that he learned about overcoming these uncomfortable situations, not about being a dad. Here's another example. This was one of my favorite talks from TED 2025, which was last year's TED conference. And it's by a journalist named Jennifer Wallace. The name of her talk is Why We Need to Know That Our Lives Matter. I'm going to play you a clip in a minute. But while you're watching it, I want you to think about this. The singular idea from her talk was about how simple acts of acknowledgement and connection can fuel a sense of purpose, even in jobs that seem obviously fulfilling, like being a firefighter or a doctor. So that was the through line of her talk. It was simple. Here is her introduction so you can see for yourself.
When we think about the most meaningful jobs in the world, firefighters are among the top of the list, right? While most of us run from danger, they run straight into it, risking their lives to save ours. The impact of their work is undeniable. At least that's what I had always assumed until I met a firefighter named Greg, who told me that even firefighters can struggle to see the impact of their work. Really? How? How can that be? I remember asking Greg, and he explained with a story. When he was a rookie, he and his crew were called to a horrific car wreck. A woman was trapped inside. Her legs were pinned under the twisted steel. Greg's training took over. He looked for an opening and he found a jagged opening, slid through to put his heavy bunker coat around the woman to shield her from the glass as they worked to rescue her. Greg promised he would stay by her side and they would get her out, and they did. But here is the part of Greg's story that stuck with me. After that intense experience, Greg would never know what happened next. Did the woman survive? Did she ever walk again? Did their efforts that night make any difference? It surprised me to learn that firefighters rarely hear about the outcomes of their rescues. Over time, that lack of closure can erode morale, fuel burnout, even cynicism. So, years later, when Greg became fire chief, he created a system to change that. He tracked the outcomes of rescues because he wanted his firefighters to know when their efforts had saved a life or eased someone's suffering, because Greg knew something vital. It is not enough to do important work. We need to know our work makes a difference. We need to know we matter.
So I hope you liked that as much as I did. I was actually in the audience at TED when she gave it, and I will say, not only did she use the 5 C's of storytelling very well, but she really had this clear through line. She didn't try to do too much. She kept it simple. And I will say the audience was mesmerized. Like I think you can probably hear you couldn't hear like anything in the background. The audio was very clear. Of course, that's a TED thing. But really the entire audience was mesmerized for her whole entire talk because she did such a great job of storytelling and she did such a good job of keeping it simple and not trying to do too much. The best stories, the best TED Talks, the best keynotes, the best, well, really any kind of presentation have a singular idea that people can easily connect to and understand. It's not just the idea that needs to be clear and simple. This also applies to the language used, which I feel like all lawyers can relate to, right? We're all about the language. That's literally what we do. So I already admitted to you about my unfortunate use of the F word early in my career. I will also admit to you something else. When I was a young lawyer, I was very guilty of trying to sound smart. Yes, either verbally or in writing briefs or letters or any kind of written document. I later learned that judges and senior partners and clients really appreciated simple, clear language that made sense. So here's an example of what not to do. And this is something that I came across. Let's see if I can bring this up. Whoops, sorry. Here is this gobbledygook of a description on a company's website describing the culture of their business. It's terrible. Okay, here's what it is. We operationalize a culture of holistic resilience by strategically centering human capital optimization, ensuring I can't even get through it, ensuring the sustained well-being and long-term vitality of our internal stakeholders. Oh, it's terrible. I can't even handle it. What does this even mean? They're really just trying to say we prioritize our team's well-being. So say that. It's ridiculous. You're losing your audience using this convoluted, ridiculous jargon. I also see this in buzzwords that gets picked up in our culture and used over and over again. How many of you have heard any of these phrases? Some of my favorites. Ready? Data driven. What about game changer? That's one that we hear all the time. And last but not least, one of my favorites, disrupting the industry, industry disruptor. It's ridiculous. This gets used over and over again, and no one really has a clear idea of what you're even talking about. Are you talking about a service? Are you talking about a product? Are you really just trying to say our company wants to do something differently, or we're breaking away from how things have been done before, or we're building something that should have always existed all along? And if so, say that. Don't use these buzzwords that no one really knows what you mean. Okay, I'm going to play you another clip from one more TED Talk, just one more, but I just love them so much. So this one is actually fun and funny, and it's from Thea Knight's 2014, so kind of a while ago at this point. Her talk, it's called Joy of a Jargon-Free World. So take a listen.
I started my professional life in a newsroom, working for a television station in New Zealand. But by the time I was about 22, I was burnt out. Ambition overtaking basic human needs like eating or sleeping. So I decided to move into a less demanding industry, finance. I took a role in employee communications at a large global bank. And when I first started, it was quite overwhelming. Suddenly, I had to learn this whole new language, business. I had deliverables, baselines, I was touching base. I think I was even circling bases. I got very confused. But after not too long, I became part of the business club. And soon I was ising everything, synergizing, monetizing. I didn't learn things, I had learnings. And it took me a while to realize I was using a lot of words, but not actually saying a lot. Jargon. It pervades corporate culture. Unnecessarily complex or empty language, complicating otherwise simple messaging. I even heard someone jargonize jargon, ironically complaining about unnecessary verbiage.
Okay, I hope you found that as funny as I did. I thought she had such a great stage presence, very charismatic, and talking about sort of a serious topic, but made it fun and accessible. So I hope you enjoyed that. But that's the corporate world, and honestly, the legal world's even worse, right? I mean, the jargon that we use might be a little bit different than in the business world, but it's similar. We for sure have buzzwords, and they are just as difficult to understand. And we do lose our audience when we use that kind of terminology. We're always leaving our clients, judges, anyone we come into contact with wondering, wait, what did she mean by that? Keep your ideas and your language simple and clear, and your audience will know exactly what you're trying to say, and they will trust your ideas and arguments.
I started.
Oops. All right. Lesson number 3. Show up with confidence. Speaking of trusting your audience, showing up with confidence is another way to connect to your audience. It really signals credibility. And we all want our clients, our partners, our other attorneys and judges to trust us, especially in high stakes moments. You've often heard, well, I think you've heard of this statistics. It's one of those that's in our culture, right? Men apply for a job when they meet about 60% of the qualifications, whereas women only apply if they meet 100%. How many, like show of hands if your screens are on, how many of you have heard this statistic out there? Yeah. No, I know. It's like we don't even know where it's from or what the deal is, but it's just the idea is that like women are only going to apply to something that they know that they meet everything. And men, they're like, close enough. Like I'll wing it. I'll figure it out. It was actually from a Harvard Business Review article. And I think it became really famous because Sheryl Sandberg cited to it in her book, Lean In. And so that's where I got this notoriety. And now it's just like out there as fact. Whether it is or it isn't is not what I'm going to be talking about. But The truth is, women, especially women lawyers, I know because I am one, we are always prepared. Always, always, always prepared. And most often, we're over prepared, right? But the fact that we're over prepared doesn't always mean that we come across with confidence. These are two separate things. You can be super prepared but not have the confidence, or you can have the confidence and not be very prepared. So think about confidence is it's really reducing anxiety and uncertainty for people around us, right? Our clients are also often very anxious about a case, no matter if it's transactional or if you're a litigator. So when we show up confidently, we're actually creating stability and trust for our clients. The good news about confidence is it's not a personality trait. Many people think it's just like you're either confident or you're not. No, that's not true. It's a skill. And like a muscle, it can be trained. I have a wide range of clients from people who come off, frankly, as a little overconfident. Some would say arrogant. And I have other ones that have stage fright, like real stage fright. And they're very successful people, but hand them a microphone and they freeze and kind of freak out. But every single one of them, from the most confident appearing to those with clinical stage fright, all of them can benefit from confidence tools and techniques. And that's some of the things I work on with my clients. So I'm going to teach you a simple visualization exercise that can help all of us show up more confidently. This is something that I encourage my clients to do a week or two before a keynote meeting or high stakes interaction, but it can really be done anytime. We're going to do a short modified version of it today with you. You guys ready? All right, I'm into it. I love the nodding heads. Thank you. It's the best participation you're going to get on a Zoom, right? But I'll take it. I'll totally take it. It's good. All right, everyone. Here's what I want you to do. Close your eyes. Thank you. Picture yourself in a situation that you have that's coming up. Think about a high stakes meeting or interaction or any kind of situation that you know that you're a little bit concerned about and you know you need to be on for. I want you to picture yourself as being confident, prepared, calm, and present. You are locked in. Notice your posture, your breath, even your facial expression. What are you wearing? How are you feeling? Now, I want you to imagine the hearing or the meeting or the negotiations going really, really well. You're literally nailing it. You're engaged, you're connected, you're clear. Now, watch yourself leaving the room with that feeling of being grounded and feeling really, really proud of yourself for how you showed up. Okay, now you can open your eyes. So the more detailed this visualization is, the more effective it is. Your brain begins to associate the situation that you're thinking about with that feeling of confidence and success. And your body looks to replicate when you're actually in the moment that you visualized. In a very real way, you are rewiring the mind-body connection and teaching your body to respond in that situation how you visualized it. Ideally, it's good to do ahead of time, but even if you are doing it right before, like if you kind of freak out and go to the bathroom and do this right before, that's still better than doing it not at all. I promise this works. I do it all the time. I'm asked to speak and give seminars like the one we're doing today. And I did this today. I did this morning. I did it last week, and I did it right before the Zoom. I promise you, it really does work. So give it a try. All right. I hope everyone's sad because we're starting to be towards the end of this amazing CLE, but don't worry, we still have some more content, so stay with me. But I hope that these 3 lessons that I told you today resonated with you, using storytelling, keeping it simple, and showing up with confidence. I promise you, incorporating these lessons into your practice will help you connect better with clients, judges, other attorneys, whoever you come in contact with. Maybe even your friends and family, but no guarantees on that, okay? staying in my lane with in the legal world. But no matter what, I hope you take that cringe feeling that you all had hearing about my adventures as a baby lawyer, dropping the F-bombs wherever I could. It's Schiff Harden, and you learn from my mistakes. Excessive swearing does not make us tough. Good storytelling, confidence, clear ideas, and clear language is what does. Thank you.
Wow, that was a tremendous presentation, Rachel. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Justice Michael Hyman would certainly agree. I don't know if anyone has read his articles in the ISBA journal, but he usually has an article toward the end about writing, and he emphasizes clear writing, not using big words and using smaller words to substitute for, for other words that you could say or use, just to keep it simple and engage the reader. And he also advocates getting rid of the legalese, which, as I think what you were sharing with us as well. And I did not write that handbook, and thank you very much, because I do write handbooks for clients, and I will certainly keep that example in mind in writing future handbooks, but that was not mine, thank God.
Well, it's so funny because Michael Hyman is a former partner of mine when I practiced at Much Cellist.
Right,
So
much, yeah.
that's really funny that you brought him up. A little blast from the past. He's a judge, so that's
On the
funny.
appellate court.
Yeah, yeah, great guy too, by the way. Anyway, we digress. Okay, so Tracy, do we have
But
time for questions? I
yes,
think
we have a
we
lot
do.
of time, because in
Okay,
fact, for
good.
CLE purposes, we actually do have to go the hour for CLE purposes.
Yeah, no, I want to.
And so,
I could go all day, Helen. Please, are you kidding
there's
me?
there's 20 minutes we have to fill up.
No.
So,
10. Fill up 10.
oh, 10. I wasn't sure what one we
But listen,
started.
it's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay if we don't fill it. It's okay. Like, we will send the materials to the state. Yeah, they're not like looking at the time, they're looking at the content. I was laughing, Rachel, because I do have a long marketing communications background, and I do it for the WBAI. But when you put up that kind of mission statement, I've run into so many of those at so many different places that are so long that say absolutely nothing. And there's a resistance to changing them. Like, I've worked in a lot of higher ed, like Northwestern, University of Chicago, and you find it there, right? Like, you want to use the big words, just, and I would always want to simplify, because I was like, you're saying nothing, and it's actually, sometimes it's hard to do. Sometimes I want to write something that says nothing because I have to say something, but I really don't want to say anything. And then it's hard, but it's hilarious when you're trying to write something and sound smart, that all of a sudden you're like, wow, I used a lot of words and I said absolutely nothing. So I'm really familiar with this, and I think people who write a lot or in the marketing world are familiar with this too. Yeah, and using the big words, people, if you have to look it up, like, you've lost somebody already. You know what I mean? So this resonates so much with me, and I just think it's fabulous. So
I'm so happy to hear that. Well, if anyone wants to shout out a question, that's great, or you can just put them in the chat. We do have some questions that I'm gonna get to, and it's funny because that dovetails into one of them, which is dealing with people ask me all the time, what do you do if you have a client who is either introverted or they're talking about really technical subjects? And I think everyone on the call can relate to that, because sometimes we're talking about dry stuff, right? Not egging people's houses or dropping F-bombs, right? I mean, I told those stories today because I knew that they're kind of fun to listen to. But if you're talking about, Rule 136 or statute, whatever, paragraph 12, B little Roman numeral 2, I mean, I know that it gets really technical, and like, what do you do with that? So, and that's often where you find the buzzwords and the jargon and saying nothing. So people always ask me, what do you do about that? So here's the thing. Not everyone is charismatic, right? Not everyone's outgoing and dynamic. I have plenty of clients who are a little dry, and I don't discriminate on my clients, right? So we work with them, right? So first we have to define the issue. Are they like a boring person? Are they nervous? Is it a stage fright thing? Is their talk too complicated? Sometimes people are very set in their ways and they're a little stubborn. They want to do it this way. They want to say by in between and any and all, or that's how they've always done it. So that's just what they're going to do. And it does take some courage and confidence to feel comfortable in the content and your subject matter so that you can communicate it in a simple way. So we first have to diagnose the issue with the particular problem. And then we have to find a style that works for them. I use the same principles, talking about the audience, using a singular idea, using stories that I talked about with you today, but we sort of have to make sure that it works for them. So, how many of you have watched tons of TED Talks? Is this like an audience that's like everyone's seen TED Talks abounding? It's okay if not. But the TED Talk that most people have watched or heard about at least is Brene Brown's talk about vulnerability. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it. It's fine, you don't need to be. But Brene Brown was a social scientist, and she gave this TED Talk. I think it was like 15, 20 years ago. It was a long time ago. But she was talking about vulnerability in the social sciences. And she had a lot of data and it was very clinical. And the way she made it, well, it's one of the most popular TED Talks ever. It has the most views, one of the most views, is she used self-deprecation. She was kind of had a funny personality, but she was very self-deprecating, both about the topic and also about herself. And it really lended her connection to her audience. So that's what worked for her, even though she was a social scientist talking about some clinical findings and some sort of like possibly boring things. So that's what worked for her. If you are talking about something very technical, call it out, own it. I mean, I'm owning some of the things that we talked about today. You know, I have owned, right? Like F-bomb doesn't work. You guys are like, check, got that one. And there's you know, if you are talking about a very minute, dry topic, just own that, call it out. It really does help. And then try to make it understandable with some of the tools that I talked about today, keeping it simple, using slides artfully, using some storytelling or examples to make it easy to understand. And then the last thing I would say on that is humor can be very helpful. Not everybody's funny, but you can still sort of use humor to kind of laugh about that something's boring or that something's technical and try to use some examples to make it more accessible, more inclusive of your audience. So that can be a great tool. I'll give you one quick example of that. At two TEDs ago, there was someone from the private equity investment firm KKR talking about employee ownership. Employees having a stake of ownership in a company. Not the most exciting topic on the planet, right? But he did a wonderful job using a lot of different tools. But one of the things he used a great story about how the company that he was talking about that KKR invested in was an Amish garage door company. Stay with me, it's good. And at the end of the transaction, they wanted to thank him, and their way of thanking him was to give him a chicken. And you got to remember, this is like a New York private equity bro suit type city guy. And they're like, thank you so much for everything you've done for us. Here's a chicken that he had to then take on the plane back to LaGuardia. And it was funny. He had great comedic timing, and he showed a picture of him like all suited up with like this cage of a chicken. So it was very funny. So it was a way to and I'm telling you today because it made such an impact on me. So humor can be done artfully, even for people who are a little introverted or aren't that funny, and that can help with technical or technical topics.
So Rachel,
I think,
I think we have a question from Carol Ann. She has her hand raised.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was great. I am the incoming president of Women's Bar, and I have a huge event in June. And my question is, so this is an event for where we're installed, a new board is installed, and there's like 600 people in the room. And I find it boring when people thank everybody and it's repetitive, right? And so obviously like, what would your advice be to try to do that, but not like do it in a boring way, or like not call everybody out? Is there a way to do it? Because like after, when by the time the president speaks at this dinner, there has been a number of speeches already. So it's kind of like where people have been called out and thanked. And so it's like, is there a way to do that?
Okay. Well, when someone hires me, I ask a ton of questions. How many people you just answered? 600 people, ballroom. Is it, you're in your industry? What are the ages? I'm going to ask you who's the audience, who's the audience, who's the audience, but also some technical questions like where are you in the lineup? Who has said what before you? What is the audio visual situation? Can you use slides? Do you have a podium? I mean, I would ask a million questions, which we don't have to go through today because
Mhm.
not everybody, I don't know how applicable this is to everybody on the call, but I'll ask you a million questions so I really understand what the universe of this speaking engagement is. So if let's say you're fourth in the lineup, there's been a lot of talks. People are, how many of us have been to those like rubber, the rubber chicken dinners where you're hearing
Mhm.
the clinking of the plate
That's
and the
exactly what it's
forks
like.
on oh, it's ridiculous. People are tuning out, they don't care. And if your sole job is to thank a couple, I mean, are we talking a couple people? Are we talking about 20 people? Like how many people do you have to thank?
I guess I'm just generally wondering, when you have a lot of people to thank, like you have to thank a board, you have to thank the outgoing president, you have to thank like your mentors, you have to thank your boss, you have to thank your family, you have to thank, you know what I mean? So it's just like,
Yeah.
it's not specific for me, but just generally when you have a lot of people to thank, like, is there a way to do that artfully that's not boring?
Well, okay. So some of the things I talked about today, call it out. You could say
Mhm.
like, "Oh, we've all been to these rubber chicken or rubber chicken. I hope it's not rubbery today. Like, hope the food's great. But we've all been to these dinners and people drone out. Like, call it out. What is going on? That I know that at this point you've heard four people talking. You're checking your phones. Like, when are we getting out of here already? But I really need to thank X, Y, and Z. So I mean, number one is just like own it that like I know everyone wants to get out of here because you'll gain connection and you'll gain some
Mhm.
empathy. Number two is try to be creative and use storytelling. Come on, I'm gonna give you my three lessons for today. Keep it simple, but storytelling is a good thing. So maybe you can tell a story about having to thank people, or maybe you could tell a story about how you got involved and weave in the thank yous of the people that you have to. If you've got AV available to you and you can do slides, maybe you can do a picture of like the board and be like, here's me on the board. I love these people. These are my people. It was so great to meet them. There's a lot of ways to be creative, to think outside the box and do something a little differently, but also checking the box of your job, if that's what you have to
I,
cover,
I
unfortunately.
I think I just need to have a consult with you. Is the outcome of this?
Oh, I'm so happy you said that
Yeah,
because like it's almost like it was like on key.
yeah.
Um yeah, so first of all, thank you guys so much for listening to me. I know we have maybe time for one more question, but here's my email, here's my website. Please reach out to me. Of course, I work with clients one-on-one. That's literally what I do. So I'm happy to obviously give you this presentation today. But if anyone has a keynote and they need help, I mean, reach out. I'm happy to work with anyone and everyone who needs the help.
So
So,
I see that Mark Palmer put in a comment there for folks to check out. So thank you, Mark. I don't know if anyone else has a question. If they do, please ask. But if not, I thought of something while you were speaking. When you put out that section on jargon, I was thinking about myself. I could see myself using the word game changer, and it happened. I had a client who was not native English speaking, and I realized how many euphemisms I use, like not the sharpest knife in the drawer, six of one, half a dozen the other. And I use phrases like that all the time as my natural speaking vocabulary. So I don't know if you have any comments or thoughts based on someone who, like me, constantly uses euphemisms to express concepts.
okay, well, the first thing is to owning it. It's like in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? It's like you have to admit you're powerless over something. So admitting it is the first step, Helen. So good job on that. You're almost there. No, but like recognizing what you're doing is really important and sort of seeing that that's funny. It's a game changer, disruptor. Um I think that recognizing it, you can't change it unless you recognize it. So seeing that you're doing it is very important. But also it's like kind of like a muscle also in that it's one thing to recognize it, it's another thing to make a change. So next time you're in the situation, if you do say game changer, you don't have to be like, "Oh my God, I said it." It's not a bad thing, but explain what you mean by it. Because you can always say like, "Oh, he or she or it is a real game changer in the industry." And then you could say, here's what I mean by that. Their innovative product or this service that they're providing, we used to do XYZ, but they're looking at it as ABC. I mean, I don't know what the specifics are, but it's okay to sort of say these buzzwords if it kind of slips out because you're used to it. But it's also important to define what you mean by that. I'm a big fan of using examples. So one thing I didn't really cover, but we can throw out really quickly is it's not even about buzzwords or jargon, but also sometimes it's about cultural references. And that's sort of what you alluded to, Helen, where you say not the sharpest crayon in the box, or some of these cultural things that you think, oh, everyone knows what I'm talking about. Even today, when I was like, Brene Brown, you've all watched Brene Brown's TED Talk. You guys were like, no, who is that? And that's okay. If I was diving down on that, I would probably show you a snippet from her talk so that you would be brought in, right? It's all about being inclusive with your audience. So just mentioning someone's name, it's not safe to assume that every single person in the audience is on the same page as you. I had a client recently who wanted to make a reference about Ron Howard. Okay, how many of you on this have ever heard of Ron Howard or know who Ron Howard is? Okay, I'm like trying to see everyone on the chat. So maybe like about half of you. I can guarantee you, if you are in your 20s or 30s, you do not know who Ron Howard is, right? Helen's laughing. So it depends. It depends on who you're talking about and who you're talking to, the generation, the ages of your audience. And so just throwing out Ron Howard with any kind of definition without explaining who that is not very inclusive to your audience. And this client could not believe it when I was like, people in their 20s or 30s don't know who Ron Howard is. And he was like, how can that be? What do you mean? It's Ron Howard. So Ron Howard is a very famous Hollywood producer. Unless you're in the filmmaking industry, you might not know that. Like,
well, Happy Days. You can't forget Happy Days. But
And
brings you back to age.
actor. Yeah, he's an actor.
Yeah, so he was a longtime actor. He was in Happy Days, the television show. He played Richie Cunningham. And yes, people in their like 40s and up kind of, know who that is. Of course they know who that is. But if you're not watching, Nick at Night, or I don't even know what other people, whatever channel plays reruns from the oldies but goodies, you might not know what that is. The point is not about Ron Howard, but this client could not possibly imagine that there'd ever be an audience who didn't know who that was. And I had to explain to him that it was a very real thing, that a lot of people under age probably 45 just have no clue what that is. But if it's really important to bring up Ron Howard, he didn't end up actually in his talk. But yes, Opie, exactly. But if you feel like you have to mention Ron Howard, just tell us who it is. It took me 2 seconds to tell you about Happy Days. I didn't even go into Opie, Mark, so just deal with that. But uh, just he's a Hollywood producer. It took a second. So if you're in your 20s or 30s, you've never heard of him, you're still in on it. You can still follow along and feel included. So be careful about buzzwords and cultural references and even acronyms. I didn't get to talk about acronyms too, but it's very important that if you're going to reference something, that you think about the age, the background of your audience and what is going to land with them and what might not. And if it might not, either don't use it or just define it. Not a big deal.
Wonderful. I remember one time I was in my 20s and I was in a really, really important meeting. Somebody asked me, she said, well, what's your elevator pitch? And I'd never heard that term in my life. Like I didn't, now I'm like, how could I not have known what that was? But I'd never heard it in my life and I didn't know what she meant. And I feel like I just stumbled all over myself when I should have just stopped and asked, what is that? But I felt stupid. So point well taken.
Well, and early in our career, we don't have the confidence to say, I don't know, what is that? Tell me. And later on, after you've been out for a while, you know that it's like okay to not know what things are. It's funny. I recently I did a workshop for it was a women's networking get together. And one of the things that we were talking about was elevator pitches. So it's funny that you brought that up. And someone was like really vulnerable and said that they thought that elevator pitches was pitching an idea and giving like an up and down about it. Like the elevator was the image of what you were trying to do. We were laughing so hard because, like you said, you take it for granted that, of course, everyone knows what an elevator pitch is. And it takes 2 seconds to just say it's really an introduction of what you do. And then even the people who know what it is, they're not going to be like, oh, like, why'd you say that? They're going to be like, okay, keep going. And even one person who didn't understand what that was is like, that's what that is. And we've all had those moments, right? Where we thought things were one thing and then we realized that they're actually not. And it's funny, whether it's you think that the lyrics of a song, you thought they were always saying this, and then you realize they were actually saying that, or cultural references, or there's so many things. So when you're giving a talk or in a crucial meeting or you're in negotiations, just take 3 extra seconds to define what you're talking about.
So, on that topic, maybe this is a funny story to end with. I don't know if there's a survey for CLE credit. My husband had a big birthday. I bought tickets to Jim Gaffigan for my husband's birthday last week. My kids had to explain to me the eggplant reference. I don't know if anyone knows what that is. I didn't.
Wow, Helen, I'm glad you brought that up.
And my teenage sons had to lean over and explain to us about the eggplant emoji.
Oh
and the irony is, someone else afterwards said, someone else said to us afterward, you took your kids to Jim Gaffigan? Isn't he a bit raunchy? I said, well, actually, the only sexual reference that was made during the entire talk, my teenage kids had to explain to me. So go figure.
Oh gosh.
He was pretty clean.
Thank you for keeping this talk so high level, Helen. We appreciate that. I thought I was being crazy throwing out the F-bomb, but you took it to a whole other level.
Well, have you seen Jim Gaffigan's Hot Pockets whole series? There's two, which came first, which was really funny. You should check that out too.
I'm about familiar.
I didn't know anything about this. I did not know anything about Jim Gaffigan until my husband's birthday came up and he mentioned in passing how he loves this comedian. Anyway, Tracy, do we have a survey? If not, is it going out later to our participants? How does that work?
Yes.
So we know how we can all get our credit.
Thank you all for attending. You don't have to do a thing. We will send you an email with a survey, and then we've already collected your ARDC number, so you don't have to do anything. We will submit for credit, and then you'll get a notification when you've received it.
All right, fantastic. Did you get Rachel's also? Because you still have your license, right, Rachel? You need credit?
I do, yes. I'm still a licensed lawyer in Illinois. Yes, it's true.
We'll give her credit, and then we'll also share with everybody the presentation and the recording. And then we'll also put that in our CLE library. That information will be in the email as well.
Wonderful. This was so much fun. Thank you very much for having me.
This was amazing.
All right.
Rachel, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing everyone at our upcoming events.
Yes.
Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.